Good evening, everyone. How are you? I am Kimberly Cleveland, Good Thing Guru, coming to you live tonight. I am super excited to be kicking off this new series, Becoming Life After Divorce. I've got some phenomenal guests that are going to be taking part in this series, and I'm excited about our first guest tonight. But if this is your first time coming to my page, getting to know me, let me first introduce myself. Like I said, I'm Kimberly Cleveland, the Good Thing Guru, um, affectionately known as the Good Thing Guru, for scripture says, he who finds a wife finds a good thing. I am a relationship coach, a life coach, and I am here to help single women prepare for marriage. That is my passion, that is my purpose, which has been birthed out of my pain. And part of that pain has been that I have also gone through divorce. And that's how we kind of got to this new series, Becoming Life After Divorce. It is something that is dear to my heart because I know others are in the same situation that I had found myself in, being divorced, learning and looking to pick up the pieces after divorce, and how do you move forward? How do you find life again and begin to look to the future with hope and to be able to thrive? And so this new live stream series on Facebook and on YouTube is solely for that purpose. Now, let me also say this caveat. I am not an advocate of divorce. I am an advocate of marriage and about helping people, women specifically, transform their lives for the better. And as a part of that, again, I want to help them to be able to pick up the pieces because, as we know, statistics say that 50 to 60% of divorce marriages end in divorce. And so we have to be able to learn how to pivot, to heal, to be able to go ahead and pick up the pieces and move forward in life with joy, happiness, purpose, and passion. And so that's what we're going to do in this series, is talk to women who have found themselves in this situation, who have picked themselves back up, and who are now boldly stepping into their new futures with purpose and passion, and who are thriving and who want to help others do the same. And so tonight, I want to go ahead and bring our speaker to the stage, Miss Vanessa Burns. I want to read her bio, and we're going to jump right on into the questions for this evening. Vanessa Burns is an electrifying speaker, master transformational coach, and founder of the She Is Free Collective, which is a global sisterhood of trailblazing women. Through her coaching, speaking, and mentorship, Vanessa equips women to break free from limiting beliefs and reclaim their voices and create lives of joy, freedom, and purpose. She is joyfully married to her husband, Emmett, a match made in grace and determination. As newlyweds who have been married twice, right? They joke that the third time truly is the charm, right? But behind the humor lies a shared commitment. Their marriage and family are their first ministry and greatest priority. Together, they are on a mission to create a life filled with love, laughter, and purpose. Vanessa's stories of real life lessons, resilience, and grace will not only inspire you, but equip you with practical tools to transform, heal, and thrive in every area of your life. I am so excited to have you. Welcome to this series, Vanessa. How are you, Queen?
I am wonderful. As I shared with you, my back was acting up, but it was not going to stop me from getting here tonight. So thank you so much for having me, Kimberly. I think this series, when I saw it, I already knew before you asked me to be a part of it that I was going to be watching and joining, because so often we feel, men and women feel, like divorce is the end. And many of us are not, I don't think most of us go into marriage even with the idea of divorce. You know, we go in optimistic and hopeful, and we work really hard. And so this is a needed conversation. And of course, the good thing guru would be the one to bring it to the forefront and have the conversations, even as difficult and sensitive as they can be. So thank you for trusting me with this topic.
Absolutely. And they are difficult conversations. Before I did this live series, I did a group coaching with women. And it is because I feel if a lot of women like me felt the shame and guilt that came after getting a divorce, right? And so we need to talk about it. We need to be able to talk about it in order for others to heal, right? And to be able to know that they're not the only ones, because we know statistics say they're not the only one. And so we need to be able to have these kind of hard discussions so that people can be free, right? I know you are a joy junkie and you're really about setting people free. And so I had to have you a part of this series. So as we jump into this conversation tonight, why don't we talk a little bit about your background, so people can have an understanding where you're coming from as we get to these questions tonight. So talk a little bit about marriage and divorce, your journey.
My journey. So to bullet point it, which since it's such a long journey, I'll sort of encapsulate it, if you will. Married the first time at 17 to my high school sweetheart and the father of my oldest daughter, and then divorced, painfully divorced less than 2 years later. After that, was single for about 8 years and then remarried. And we were together almost 30 years, married 26 of those. So that was certainly one that at that point and stage in my life, I certainly did not have any expectation that we would not die together, like we would be, married till death do you part, especially with that many years in. And then unfortunately, but fortunately, we divorced, and I can share some details. I have permission to share some details with you if that's needed. And found myself divorced again, and really, in my opinion, the first time really single, because I was a mom at 17. It had been since 17 or before that. So I had actually never lived alone without at least a child. And by this time I had 2 children. So it was definitely not something I anticipated or the way I would live my life. But then I found love again. Love found me again. And I am, like, as you mentioned earlier, happily remarried. And it's good. It's real good. So 3 times, we're saying 3 times the charm. That's it. This is it.
Right. Absolutely. Absolutely. So let's delve into some questions tonight. I want to start with releasing the pain, right? As I introduced this series last week, we're going to be talking a lot about the re-season. And I give credit to my sister, Taj, Battle, because she is going through a re-season. And I said, wow, that coincides exactly with the 8 re's that I have for this season.
Wow.
For the series. And so releasing the pain is the first one I want to talk about. What were your emotions that you were feeling as a result of your marriages coming to an end? What were you feeling?
I think the first one is sort of denial. I really think that denial is a good word. It was like, okay, this is going to get better. The circumstances will change. I just have to hang in there. I just have to, be the good wife and, do all the right things. So there was a lot of denial and performing to do what I thought would work to fix it. And, as you know, I do something called the Fixer's Detox, and it was really born out of that part of my life, excuse me, where I realized that I was trying to fix something. And, unfortunately, I was the only one that thought that there was anything wrong that needed fixing. And so there was a lot of denial. And with that denial came sadness. And, with the sadness came just a really, difficult acceptance that it was over. There was depression. There was anxiety. I mean, I went through insomnia, couldn't sleep. There were a lot of things with it. And I think one of the most profound one was just a feeling of failure that I had, maybe I didn't try hard enough, or, maybe we didn't try hard enough. And so that feeling of failure was, that was heavy. That was heavy. And, in marriage, oftentimes, depending on your marriage, we had a lot of people that looked up to us as a married couple. And, people saw our chemistry, they saw our vibe. They saw us out all the time. They saw us in church every Sunday. And, I used to have women tell me all the time, oh, I can't wait till God blesses me with a husband like yours. And I was like, girl, you don't know, I'd be ready to go upside his head with a rubber mallet when we get in the car. So, but people see something, right? And they build a narrative around it. And they, and unfortunately, there are times we had to be really careful not to feed into the narrative of other people about us. And so, but there was still a sense of, wow, I was a minister, I am an ordained minister. So I'm a minister in the church, I'm held to this, standard. And so a whole lot of releasing all of that as well. And looking at, like, what does my life look like when I'm no longer Mrs. Vanessa Elam? And what does that look like now? Because I had been that for so long. And really that marriage was part of my whole reboot of my life. I met him shortly after I came out of prison. And so that was, we were my whole new life. And, I'd gotten great jobs, and we lived in beautiful homes. And, so we just had a real life, and I didn't know what it looked like without him, but I did know I could make it. I just didn't really want to face that I was going to have to, and kept just holding out hope that, something would kick in, something would change. It's like, okay, it's been 5 years, but it'll get better, So that's, if I can, not that was in a nutshell, but.
Right. No. I like that you brought up the fact about the sadness and the feeling like you had failed, because I too felt that way. And I spiraled into a deep depression. Because I too was married twice. And so definitely after the second time, it was a spiral into a deep depression, because, my greatest desire was to be a wife and to be a mother, and to now not only have failed once, but to have failed twice was the narrative in my mind, that, you are a failure. How are you failing at this? And like you said, I don't believe anyone goes into their marriage with the intention of it failing.
Right.
You do everything that at the time to try to be successful. But what I've learned for me is to extend myself grace, because you don't know what you don't know. You can only get better, right? And that's why I want to delve into this series and uncover some things as a result of that. So where were you intentional about addressing those negative emotions? What did your healing journey look like? What steps did you take, Vanessa?
Well, by the time, because at this point I was in my late 40s, early 50s. So when I really, when it appeared that things were really failing, and I wasn't sure if we could make it back. And so, at that point, I was fully endorsing of, coaching or therapy, things of that nature, and really was on a self-love journey that had nothing to do with my marriage. It was just a journey that I was on. I was serving as women's director for a very large congregation in Baltimore, where I was a member. And so, I had invested heavily in my own self, in terms of making sure that what I was practicing, what I was preaching. And, and I shared with women all the time, it's not, self-love is not an affront to a marriage. It actually is a blessing for a marriage, but you have to be with someone who gets it, who understands it, and understands that it has nothing to do with pushing them away or loving them less. But the more that we do love and care for ourselves, the better we are for those that we're, called to be in relationship with, or, whether it's, serving our children, our parents, our families, or at work. That was important. So I was good in that regard. I was intentional about going to therapy, which I did. My ex-husband did not want to go to therapy. We had probably approached that subject 150 times in those many years. I don't think at the time he believed in it. He eventually had a change of heart, but it was for his own journey, which I totally celebrated that he was ready to do something for himself. But so I went to therapy on my own. I went to individual therapy to not really discuss so much ending the marriage, but what am I going to look like when I come out of this? Mm-hmm. And I wanted to be whole, and I didn't want to be destroyed. I didn't want to be in pieces. And I had so much that I was doing. So it was like, okay, I don't have time. I don't have time to fail. I don't have time to be sad. But I allowed myself the time to grieve. And once the separation was official and we no longer resided under the same roof, that was really, it was tough. And, I had a lot of tearful days and nights, and still having to come to church and keep the brave face for those that were, that I was called to serve. And, I'm very grateful. And I say this all the time. I don't think I would have been married as long as I was if it hadn't been for my girlfriends and my sister circle and family, because I had close sisters that I could share what was going on without you girl, I wouldn't put up with this kind of mindset. I don't have those kind of friends. I did once upon a time, and they're not in my life anymore for that reason. They supported what I wanted, which was to keep my marriage. So I got prayer a lot. I had a lot of support in that regard. And I think that having a village while you're married is so important. I do see a lot of women get married, and I've even seen this when some of my friends that are men, they get married, and then your spouse is of course supposed to be so important to you, and your first ministry is home, but then they neglect the friendships and that have supported them through that time. And there were many times in the course of that 20 some years that we were married that I wanted to give up. And I had girlfriends that were like, girl, just hang in there. Just, stay prayerful. Or someone would send me a book, or, a ministry tape or a song, and I would just, I was always asking God for fresh oil. Give me fresh oil for this marriage. Give me fresh, but then I just got to a point where I was like, I'm kind of the only one working on this. And, the stronger that I got with that, the more that I realized that sometimes, things don't end the way we expect them to. And what do we do with that?
Right. So many good things that you brought out there to the forefront. The importance of self-love. I'm always preaching that you first have to learn to love yourself, which sounds selfish, but it's not. Learning to love yourself before you can even begin to learn to love someone else, right? Because even if you think that you love them and you don't love yourself, that is creating a lot of different bombshells that are going to be going off in the marriage because of your own lack of self-love, right?
Yes.
And so I'm always preaching that. And then I love that you said that you knew that you needed to have an investment in yourself, right? And all that again is another thing that I'm always preaching, is that this journey of becoming that good thing is always about investing in yourself, making sure that you are always trying to be the best that you can be, no matter what season of life that you're in. That is not only going to bless you, but as you said, bless the people that you serve, bless the people that are around you, the better that you become, right? And then, all of us have our own journeys, and where we were with therapy, counseling. You said you went to therapy. Counseling was probably never really addressed. And so that's always a battle when we talk about divorce, because that's the first thing people want to know. Well, did you guys go to counseling?
Yeah.
Did you go to therapy? Did you try everything?
Yes.
you know and some people have, some people didn't, but at the end of the day, what I came to realize is you can't make another person do anything,
You
right?
cannot.
It's their choice. It's two people in the covenant, but it's two people have their own will. And so you can't force them to do anything. You can't force them to go to counseling. You can't force them to stay, right?
Right.
And so you have to come to grips with that. And you talked about grieving. That is such a critical point of this healing journey, is giving yourself the grace and permission to grieve the marriage,
Yes.
because that's real. That's
It
real.
is.
You have to grieve that,
It's like a
even though.
death. It's like a
Yes,
death. It
absolutely.
psychologists say that oftentimes the emotions, the cycle of ending a
Absolutely.
marriage is often like the same cycles when there is a death. I've sat with women who said that it was worse than a death because they'd had loss. But what was worse is that that person was still walking around. They could still run into them. They could see them with a new love. They could, and that it would inflict, the pain would be re-inflicted
A trigger.
because of that, that they couldn't kind of put it away and say, okay, this person is gone. And I'm not suggesting for any moment, so please let me put that out there, that someone losing their spouse is the same as someone going through a divorce, but the cycle of healing, and even the acknowledgement of it, the denial, the anger, all of that, those cycles are very similar. And I've had women sit with me and say, I wish he was dead, because then I wouldn't have to worry about seeing him. Now, I wasn't in that place. And I just think because of all of the work that I had done on myself, and the work that God did in me, and even needing to be a leader to so many women, I felt a deep responsibility to have my stuff together, so that I wasn't sitting there talking the talk but not walking the walk.
Right.
So, and recognizing people are not going to, they're going to be people who don't understand. They don't get it,
Right.
and I have my own thoughts on, people who are willing, and this is no judgment, but there are people who are willing to live in a loveless marriage and stay married. And I saw a lot of that, unfortunately, in the church.
Me
And
too.
not just and I don't mean just my local church, but just in the church in general, through my travels and preaching and visiting and stuff like that, and friends that are members of other congregations. And I used to smirk. Yes, I did. Sometimes when a church announcement would be made, and today we're congratulating sister and brother so and so, who've been married 35 years, and everybody is cheering. And I, unfortunately, because I've been working with the couple, or with the wife, know that they haven't slept in the same bedroom in 10 years.
Right.
There's been children created outside the marriage that she has to look at every Sunday, and just miserable, but everybody's cheering, because we have this idea that if you're married, it must be good. If you marry, it must be anything better than being single. So we have this excitement about longevity in marriage. And what I did know is that was not for me. I did not want that. I didn't want to live in a situation. Now that there was no cheating in my marriage. My husband did not cheat on me. There was no domestic or intimate partner violence, none of that. We literally grew in different directions. And, we said toward the end, we were like, we did good. We did good, especially we did good for a man that didn't ever want to get married. When he met me, he said marriage was not on his mind. He had seen enough bad marriages in his own circles or whatever. And he was like, and I'm like, you're not ever thinking about getting married? And he was like, no. I'm like, not at all. And I'm like, okay, because we've been hanging out for a year now. My kids, I know, like, where are we going?
Right.
And I'm, I'm that girl anyway. I want to, things have to have a purpose. I have to
Right.
know the direction I'm going in. And so when we did get married, we laughed about it later. We still do. It's like we did really good for where we were. And we accomplished a lot. We were there for family. We supported family. We did things in ministry together, separately and together. And, we became very close friends. And to this day, we're bestie. That's my boy. I love him to life. And it's mutual. I could pick up the phone right now and call him, and he would be like, where are you at? What's going on? And that's not a conflict with my marriage, because he and my husband get along great. So there is even healing in that place as well.
That is wonderful. Wonderful. Let's talk a little bit about rebuilding your life after divorce. Once your divorce was finalized, you talked a little bit about it in your healing journey, but what were some of the doubts, if any, you had about how to go about rebuilding your new life, and was what you had in your vision even possible?
So I don't have
marriage one or marriage two, either one.
Yeah. The marriage one was just kind of almost like a blip on the radar screen. We were madly in love from high school, right? So what that looks like. And then after 2 years went our separate ways, but we have an amazing daughter as a result of that union, which I will never regret. And I think she's watching tonight. I think both my daughters might be watching tonight. So I had permission. I did ask the blessing of my family. I did ask the blessing of my ex-husband to share, and wanted him to know, what I was going to share. And he was like, go for it. Speak your truth, So I think.
So after the first one, was there any doubts there?
No.
About your future and rebuilding your life?
So I have an ability, I don't know what, I guess it's innate, I used to always plan B God, if you will. So if this is what's going on now and it's good, I had a plan B in my mind if it failed, because I'd seen so much failure around me as it related to relationships, just growing up, watching friends, family, whatever, my own, some members of my own family. So I always had like, okay, so if this doesn't work out, what would that look like? So I could see myself, in a sexy apartment and, living life and traveling and meeting people. And it's very interesting to me looking back that so much of what I am now experiencing on purpose for my life were the things that I wanted for myself before I got married and had babies and did all those things. And neither of those things were ever a part of the plan. The plan was always that I would be single for all of my life, that I would have rich boyfriends all over the world, and that my sisters were going to have the babies, and I was going to be the best before the rich auntie became a thing. I was planning on being the rich auntie for my life. I was going to put them through school. My sisters weren't going to have to worry about money, and I would be the rich auntie and exposing them to travel and all these things. So I always had in my mind that I could live by myself and be okay. I enjoy my own company. I love to be free. And so I didn't really have a hard time. The hard time was what happens with the person I leave behind when we go our separate ways. That was the pain point for me. It wasn't because I could see myself cooking for myself and, enjoying my garden. I'm a gardener, so I'm obsessed with flowers and growing things and enjoying spaces and coming and going as I please, which, when you're married, you can't do, and which I did. And, in my marriage, my second marriage, I had a lot of freedom. And I thought that it was great, but I think the freedom actually came from, one of the things we laugh about is he liked being alone so much. So this is why he never cared if I was going on a beach bunny trip with my girls or going to a conference or, traveling for work. He was like, all right, girl, you good, let me take you to the airport, kind of thing. So my friends were like, girl, you got the best of both worlds. You can do what you wanted, and of course I wasn't doing what I wanted to do. I was, still of course staying within the marriage and the covenant there, but I didn't have the restrictions of I want to go, have brunch with the girls at 2:00 on Saturday, and I may not get home till 10. And he was totally fine. I used to be offended that he wasn't checking on me. I'm like, I've been gone 3 hours. You're not checking on me, So I had these expectations of what love looked like, which,
right.
Maybe we'll have a chance to talk about, because those expectations sometimes can be a detriment to a marriage if you're not on one accord about what those expectations are. So I was actually good. I was fine and prepared to live on my own.
Right. But I want to talk about, Vanessa, a little bit about the rebuilding from the perspective of, you said that you dealt with this, oh my God, I felt like such a failure. So how do you rebuild with this idea in the back of your mind that you are a failure, and also this idea of, you mentioned about, well, who am I going to be now that I'm not Mrs. Elam, right? How do you rebuild with those things in the back of your mind?
That's a tough one to nail down. I'm a woman of faith. And one of the things that I know is whatever we focus on and whatever we believe to be so, we attract more of that.
Yep.
And I saw evidence of that in during the times when I was really rebuilding my life, and it was good, and I was seeing the results of my prayers and speaking life into my situation versus speaking on what I didn't want. I spoke what I did want and how I wanted it to manifest. And I used to always end those times with God by saying, God, this or something better. Because, God, you can ask God for something, but I'm like, God, if you got something better, because, I'm limited in what I can think of is the good thing. Right. But God can always outdo my deepest and greatest imagination. So I really had to be very careful about how I spoke about my life.
Vigilant.
And then I thought about how many times women had come to me about and it didn't have to be marriage. It could be just about any area of their life that they've quote unquote kept failing at. And I heard a phrase, and I hope I'm going to quote it right, but it basically says that failure is feedback. And I latched on to that during the separation, when we were about to go through the separation. It was like, okay, failure is feedback. And so what's the feedback? And the question is, what is the lesson? And does it have to end the way I see everybody else's end? Do we have any say? Did I have any say on what this transition was going to look like? And we did. And, we could have wallowed in our pain of sadness, because let me be clear, it was sad on both parts. It wasn't like, I'm just going to hop off and go live my new life or whatever. We cried like babies on each other the day that we left our house and went separate ways. It was deeply sad, and there was deep grief. But we had, in calmer moments, had conversations about, we are family. We built a family. We're part of a family. And that doesn't ever have to change. Even if we wind up with new people, even if we wind up remarried, we're family. And we built something. We built something beautiful. We built something powerful. And instead of saying that it failed, we decided that it evolved. And it evolved because I wasn't the same girl that he married. I wasn't that same 26-year-old, maybe I was 30. I think I met him at 26, but I married him at 30. He was a little older, 37. And it was like, but when we look back, we'd had so many good times. We had done so many things with our lives. I'd had some extraordinary experiences that I really attributed to him because of where I was positioned in life. And so we took the good along with the pain that we were going through and decided that we were always going to be family and that we weren't going to not talk. We were not going to not stay in communication. It's sticky. It can be a little uncomfortable because the families are like, okay, do we invite her? Do we invite him? These are things he's always invited to. What now? And then when Emmett and I were, dating in public and I had to talk to him about that. It's like, okay, now what does that look like? What does that look like for my sister who always hosts, these big gatherings and he's always there. And then when we were separated, he was still there. So he was coming over my sister's house and I wasn't even at my sister's house. So it's like, you have to be willing to not be mad about everything and not use it as an excuse to be ugly and shady, to be honest about how you really feel and, pray and believe and trust that it's going to work out. I saw us where we are now, but a couple of people that I shared that with, I know they thought I was crazy. They were like, "Girl, your husband and your ex-husband and your current husband being friends, like where they do that at?" But they do it. They do it, and some of it is letting go. Some of it is letting go and saying, it is what it is. But we went to court together. We went to our divorce together, and then my sister met us and we had breakfast together and we hugged and we were like, all right, I'll talk to you next week. And, we were okay. And, I began to see him feel lighter. And I said, wow, what a burden off you that you no longer feel like you have to take care of anybody anymore. You could just do you. Now, me, I'm a mom. I always feel like I got to take care of somebody. So it's different for me. But he started traveling abroad and really, seeing the world and doing some things he wanted to do. And he didn't have anything stopping him from doing that because he always had more of a remote job where he could be anywhere, anytime. I was more, tied to the area. And so, yeah, but it was very, I was very intentional. And I don't know that either of us knew that it would get this good and be this good and that we would be this close. He doesn't come in town without seeing us. And, it's still, crabs on the deck, you coming through, things with our daughters, our family. It's good. But we were intentional about it even through the pain, and I think it's so important not to, when it's over, the finger pointing doesn't help. Right. It doesn't help. And the truth is we both participated in, some of it was that I think that in the early days, and I do share this a lot with women, is your husband. Some people are like, my husband is my everything. Okay, well, no judgment. That's good for you. My husband can't be my everything. And, I think it's almost unhealthy to expect someone to be everything for you because they're your spouse. And, my husband wasn't a communicator. He wasn't going to sit and have like the hard conversations and then not he's going to find something else to do and something else to focus on so he can deflect from that conversation. It's just not, who he was. And, but I had good friends for that kept my confidences and kept my marriage, uplifted and in prayer. And I didn't do a lot of talking about my marriage to my friends. When we announced that we were separating, my family was devastated. And so were my girlfriends, because nobody knew what was really going on. They didn't know that it had gotten to that point. And everybody's like, why didn't you tell us? And it's because that's my husband. I'm supposed to cover him. It was none of your business at the time. I'm telling you now because you need to know. But I think we had to be careful about covering our spouses, covering, their vulnerabilities and not exposing those because we're angry. Marriage is for grown people, for real. It is for grown people.
Right.
And, I learned a lot in that process. And I'm actually really proud. And that's not, please don't take that in any arrogant way, but I'm proud of how we processed our evolution
Yeah.
and, and how we did it.
Yep. I love that. I love the one point that you talked about being intentional, even with the feelings of failure, and the question of, well, who am I going to be after misses? Is just really refocusing and being vigilant about your thoughts and standing in your faith and having that vision of, I know that I can move forward, right?
Yeah.
That intentionality of refocusing yourself. Like, it's okay to have those feelings. We're natural. We're human beings, and so sometimes we're going to have those feelings. But then being intentional about, but no, I know my faith, and I know who I am, and what's possible, and having a clear vision about how you want to move forward. You had a clear vision about how you wanted to move forward with your family, and how you
Right.
didn't want to have the finger pointing, right? And
Right.
not, this is what it
And I had
is.
my moments. Don't get me wrong. I had my,
Right. That's what
I
I'm
had my
saying. We
moments.
all are going to have our
Yeah.
moments. And so we have to give our, self permission that, okay, yeah, I had my moment, but being intentional about refocusing yourself,
Mm-hmm.
and staying true to that, so that you can stay positive in order to rebuild and move forward, and pick up pieces if there are pieces, and move forward in a healthy way. So thank you for sharing that. And
No,
that it is
and
possible that you can be friends with your ex
you
and
can't.
have
It's
a healthy,
and it really depends on the people. It
right.
depends on the two people and if they are willing. Um, and the
Absolutely.
choices that we make, even in future relationships, beyond that. I didn't know if Emmett was that guy, if he was, but he kept saying, no, we should meet. We should meet. And I was like, not about all that, He was like, no, babe, we should meet. And I'm like, yeah, okay. But when it happened very, like, I literally let go because we were having a big family gathering. My
Mm-hmm.
family from New Jersey was coming, and that was something that I wanted my man to be at the time. And we weren't fiancés yet, but we were in serious relationship. My family knew him. We were all, everybody got along with him really well. And then, but at the same time, that would be a gathering that my ex-husband would and should have been a part of. And so my sister said, what do I do? And I said, invite them both, and we're just gonna enjoy life, and we're gonna enjoy this food and these people and this music and this good time.
Mm-hmm.
And they got along so well the first day, the first time that they met. I actually had lost sight of them at the party, and I was like freaking out a little bit. And I walked downstairs and walked out on the patio, and they were out there with some other gentlemen from the party, and they were laughing and talking. And both of them, I will never forget this moment, and several people witnessed it. My ex-husband Michael said to me, he said, you told me he was a good guy, and you were absolutely right. And then my now husband said to me, he said, you said he was a good guy, and you were absolutely right. This is like, and they were pounding it up and toasting. And I was like, what? Like, so it's like I prayed for that, but it was happening so fast and just, kind of organic, which
Mm-hmm.
was beautiful. It wasn't anything forced. It was kind of like, hey, this is him. And then that was it. Like, and actually that setting was great because it wasn't some isolated situation where there had to be forced conversation. They didn't have to say another word to each other that they didn't want to, because there were plenty of people there that they both knew that they could enjoy time with and didn't have to be with each other in space and stuff. So, that was good. But I did want to say something, when we were talking about, that transition and how, one of the ways that I got through the failure piece was remembering that before I was her, I was me. So before I was her, the wife, the minister, the ministry leader, before I was those things that people had built a narrative around, I was Vanessa. And I was always God's daughter. I was always, the one that he walked through, with fire and brought me out of. So I didn't have that. I had to keep remembering that. And I was like, okay, so now I'm going to figure out like, what's this next chapter look like for me? Like, I'm excited. And, it sounds weird to say that I was excited, but, the mindset that you approach anything with has so much to do with an outcome. And so I think that, that had a lot to do with it. And then, this is sort of our legacy really in our family, that we started something that we believe is powerful and helpful and loving, and it honors what was, but also gives tribute to what is to be, and gives high expectation and excitement for what's coming.
I love that. Yes, rediscovering self. That is definitely part of one of the reasons, and I love that that you said I remember who I was even before I became Mrs.
Yeah.
And so part of that is too is for some women is rediscovering who you are, because now having gone through being married, there was, you were growing during that marriage. And so who you started off as before you got married and who you are now may be a totally different person. You may not be able to go back to the single Vanessa prior to you being married is going to be the same single Vanessa after marriage. So you may have to uncover and rediscover self, who that is. And so thank you for bringing that up, because that is a great point. Now, I can't let you out of here without talking about, since you are the joy donkey, about renewing your joy, right? Renewing your joy and renewing your spirit. What nuggets do you have for those who are on tonight about if they're struggling with, whether it be mental health, whether it just be their spirit being low, how, if they're struggling with the sadness and depression, how do you go about renewing your joy?
For me, and Kimberly, you've heard me say this a million times because it's true. The mindset, what you decide to be, is really what happens for you. And if you decide that, and we're going to have our moments, and I call them moments where we're, sad. And I think that it's okay. It's more than okay to feel that. I think one of the mistakes that we make is that we sweep emotions and feelings under the rug and try to pretend like everything is okay. And I know we have to push through, we have to work, or we have to take care of, people, or whatever. But wherever possible, take breaks from those things that require you to pour so much out of yourself. And I'm not saying don't give back. I'm not saying don't do and help and support. But a lot of my joy cup, got full because I did enjoy my own company. And there was a time, long time ago, that I didn't, and I learned to. So I think that learning to really get in touch with who you are, you can do that in so many ways. You can journal. There's books you can read. There's so many, groups and meetups out there. Be a part of a group, even if it's not in person, if it's something online where you can, share experiences. And, because sometimes I think that when we're going through grief and sadness, we feel like we're alone, or the people may feel a way about the ending of your marriage, and you may not have the support from your immediate circle. And it is a healthy thing to seek support outside of the circle. If that circle is not supporting you, if that circle is not nurturing you during that time, it's okay to go look for a circle that does. I reclaimed my joy and filled my joy cup up by spending time in my journal. I'm famous for grabbing my journal and my Bluetooth speaker and my blanket and, finding a pretty spot by the water and, listening to music. And my therapist gave me an exercise, which I've actually since employed in my own coaching practice. And I wrote letters, and she said to write 3 letters for, look at the situation that I was dealing with and write 3 letters. One letter is to the person who hurt you. The second letter is to yourself, whether it's forgiveness, whether it's acknowledging your own participation in it, because what we have to do is be honest about what we know happened, and own your part. That you don't get to that pure joy place by pointing fingers and blaming. You don't get there. You just don't. You can't get there from there. So and then the third letter that you write is to how you decide that you want the outcome to be, what you want it to look like, and to be honest about that, to not say, well, my ultimate is that we get back together. Okay, but if it's ended and you're still in that place of being full of grief, I think that the letter exercise helps a lot. I work with women with that exercise. And so shout out to Danielle Hatchell, who's my therapist at the time, who was just really so helpful in so many ways with holistic practices to help me get through, and honored my faith in that journey. Pull on your faith. If you are a person of faith, this is where it matters. This is where the rubber meets the road, if you will, to, employ your faith, read your scriptures, spend time in the things that build you up, and then figure out what makes you, like, what lights you up, that has nothing to do with another person. And that's important, especially for those of us who are communal, like myself. I'm very relational. I love my friends. I love my family. I love spending time with them. Like some of the greatest times I've had are with those people. And I look for that. But like, what makes me happy that has nothing to do with anyone else? And, once you put that out there, and even when you write it down, the word says, write the vision and make it plain. And you write down, God, what does it look like to be this now? Like, what do I even know about myself? Because we do lose ourselves in marriages sometimes. And we forget who we are. We forget our passions. We forget the things that we said we would always do. I refer back to the book, Terry McMillan's book and movie, Waiting to Exhale. And, the main character, Angela Bassett, was supposed to, kept wanting to start her catering business. She talked about, and he was always, not now, next year, whatever, as she was helping him build a business. And so when it abruptly ended, so devastatingly, and that he was pushing her out of a business that she had literally helped him build, and she didn't know what she really was at that point. She had to figure out, what did life look like without him? And you have to figure out what those joys are, and then do those things. And I believe in grounding. I believe in walking outside barefoot and getting in the ground, getting my feet in the ground. There's a lot of wonderful ways that we can center ourselves and, spend time with friends, go out and enjoy times where you can just laugh and be, and you don't have to do anything. You could just be. Go listen to music, go to concerts, go take yourself to brunch, travel. There's so many groups now, and Kimberly, you and I know, and Kimberly, you're a perfect person for this, with solo travel. Your travel inspires so many people. To see you, just getting on planes and being in these gorgeous places. And then now you've opened that up with your business to others to be able to share that with you. Do solo travel. Some of us don't even know what it looks like to get on a plane alone, or to go in a restaurant and sit down without anybody there. So rediscovering those things, and, get support. There's coaches like me and you. There are, good therapists out there. I love Therapy for Black Girls is a great place. But there's all types of Psychology Today has great list of therapists. You can look them up with your by zip code, and you can look at their bios and decide whether or not if their practice or their niche works for where you are. I do recommend the church, but I'm cautious in the recommendation of that, and I'll say why. The first is that sometimes the slant, it depends on the pastor, of course, but sometimes the slant is to keep you together. And if the marriage is over and it's really over, then, what do you do then? And then the truth is that a lot of pastors are not trained as therapists or professional counselors. And so, and some will impose a certain mindset upon the couple or the person. So I do suggest, if you feel comfortable, going in that direction. Some pastors are great that will refer you to a good therapist and say, I know about this person. They've done some good work with individuals who are going through divorce or whatever and going through this grieving process. But be really careful, where you go for help, and but get the help.
Yeah, absolutely. You definitely touched on some things that I find are important when we talk about renewing your joy, or just renewing your spirit. Definitely tapping into your faith and your beliefs, and really exploring what really truly does bring me joy outside of this relationship that I have. Let me get back to those things. Right.
Yes.
Let me get back to for me, it was being by the ocean. And like you said, traveling is my love. Get back to those things that give you purpose, that ignite your passions,
Yes.
tap into those things. That is really what's going to help you to tap into renewing your joy and renewing your spirit, so that you can feel inspired and motivated to step boldly into the future and rebuild your life. And so I love that you tapped into that. And support groups are so very, very important.
Really
you talked about support groups when it came to renewing your joy, and also just supporting you as you go through your healing journey, and supporting you in your marriage. Like you said it was important for you to have people who surrounded you and believed in marriage like you did, while you were in your marriage and while you were going through, and so I love that you brought that up.
And some of them were single, by the way. So that debunks the myth that married women can't have good friends that are single. Because my single friends were cheering me on, but they were like, okay, V, if it's over, we're praying for him, we're praying for Mike, and we're praying for you, and we're here for you. But never a word about, girl, I wouldn't put up with that, or that's over, once things were known and it was announced. So I think I just want to debunk that myth, because that's out there. I cringe when I hear that, as if a single woman is against marriage because she's not married. It's just it's a very toxic mindset that is out there. So literally some of my closest friends, closest to my heart, in every way, are single, and they are team Vanessa and Emmett all the way. So yeah.
Absolutely. Well, what else would you like to share tonight as we close out? Please let people know how to, if they were inspired tonight and desire to stay connected to you, how they can do that. Please share.
You can, I have an actual office number, old school, but I answer my phone. So
love it.
Say it again.
I love that.
Yes, I do. I think, I'm one of the things I've been sharing with ladies in our Joy Joint group on WhatsApp is that we are moving beyond the digital, because, we had to go digital for during the pandemic and even post-pandemic, and it's become the norm. But I'm ready, to do more gatherings in person, because that's my heart, that's my love. I love the energy that's in the room that can't be duplicated online. And so the Joy Joint is moving from the private group on what's to app to a platform called Podia, where you'll be able to do get digital downloads of my courses and programs, as well as sign up for events and membership. So we have a 5-week discussion series on the Let Them Theory book by Mel Robbins, which I highly suggest. If there's a book right now that I would highly recommend, it would be that one, just because sometimes we really have to let them. But then when you let them, what do you do with you? So my series is called Let Them, period, Watch Me, period. So we're going to start a five-week series at the end of September. So I can share that on my page as well. But they can reach me on IG, on Facebook. It's Vanessa Burns on either of those platforms. The phone number is 202-709-6692. So if you want to reach out for coaching or, that type of support, I am still taking coaching clients right now. And once we start the 5-week series, then, we'll have, that'll be in a group. So.
Awesome. What was that number again? I want to make sure I share that in the comments.
No problem. 202-709-6692. You made me second guess it. I was like, wait a minute.
And Vanessa Burns on all platforms.
Yes, on all platforms. Yes.
Perfect. All righty. Thank you, Queen. You shared so much of your journey. Thank you for your authenticity, your vulnerability, and just sharing the wisdom that you've gleaned from your journey. I thank you for that. And I know it's greatly appreciated and definitely needed.
I am honored. I love, I always love what you do. Good thing, Guru. I just love that you have had the tough conversations in many platforms. We talk about things you do during the holidays, his becoming. And so I love this series, love the work that you're doing, asking God to continue to bless you and enrich you. And, we're looking for you. We're waiting for your love, your third marriage. It's all right. It's good. It's well. And, so many people when they wait until they're married. Well, it's like, well, what can somebody who's divorced tell me about marriage? A whole lot. And you embody that. You live that life of enjoying your singleness and at the same time being open to your new love. So me and Emmett send our love to you and appreciate you so much. You witnessed our love commence officially in Jamaica. We'll never forget that. It was a wonderful, wonderful time together. So I'm so happy that just to see that the work that you're continuing to do, and I'll always share it.
Thank you so much. All right. Take care.
All right. Love you. Take care.
Love you too. Bye-bye.